Hello. Court Language Access Services of the Oregon Judicial Department welcomes you to our Court Interpreting Oral Exam Preparation, Module 2, Sight Interpreting. Court Language Access Services appreciates your interest in becoming a certified court interpreter and your dedication to preparing for the exam. Some of the information in this module is adapted from the National Center for State Courts Court Interpreter Oral Examination Overview. I'm Carla Farrell, a certified court interpreter of Spanish in Oregon since 2004. Before that, I did medical interpreting in Oregon and, during an earlier career, often interpreted for monolingual television reporters in Central and South America during years of political unrest and civil wars. Trust me when I mention that court interpreting presents great challenges, which require finely honed interpreting skills and hold interpreters to high standards. In my experience, court interpreting is the most difficult. In this module, it is our goal to share various tools, tips, and resources that you can put to use in preparing for the rigorous court interpreting oral exam. In Module 2, we focus on sight translation, also known as sight interpretation. I'll be using both phrases. In addition to giving you tips and techniques for developing your court interpreting skills and preparing for the test, we have practice material for sight translation incorporated in this module. For your benefit, please follow our recommendation for the use of a voice recorder during the practice material portion of this module and whenever you're practicing sight interpreting. Why? Listening to the recording of your sight translation gives you the opportunity to listen carefully to your rendition, objectively identify errors and areas that need skill improvement, such as improving the fluidity of your rendition or controlling your own false starts, such as or if struggling to remember vocabulary, or wrestling with syntax in the target language. You can use your smartphone or an external voice recorder. Our Module 2 objectives are: first, you'll have a feel for how the sight translation portion of the oral exam is administered. Why? This can help you devote some of your self-study time in ways that simulate test administration. Knowledge of exam structure may reduce test stress or anxiety on the day you take the exam. Second, you'll learn techniques on preparing for the sight interpretation portion of the oral exam. The exam isn't easy. In my mind, the more you study and practice for the exam, the more prepared you will be on exam day. Third, you'll have a sight translation practice during this presentation. The material we give you is not found in any version of the real exam, but it does give you a taste of the type of material you might be given to sight interpret during the exam. Now, let's move on to understanding the structure of the sight interpretation portion of the test. In Oregon, sight translation is the first portion of the oral exam. In this portion, there are two parts. The first part, sight interpreting from English to the target language. The exam proctor will instruct you about the 6 minutes total you will have to review the document and then orally render your sight translation. The test document is 225 words. Make sure you use some of those 6 minutes to read to yourself, not out loud, the document the proctor hands you, and make any notes you want, though not on the document handed to you, rather on the notepad given to you by the proctor. There will be pens, pencils, and notepads provided to all test takers. You don't have to keep track of the time. The exam proctor does that for you. If you haven't started your sight translation performance within 2 minutes of being handed the document, the proctor will prompt you to start because you have 4 minutes left to render your sight interpretation. Once you've finished with the English to target language portion, the proctor will hand you the target language to English document, and once again, you'll have 2 minutes to read silently and 4 minutes to orally give your sight translation. Each portion has 25 scoring units for a total of 50. To pass the sight translation portion of the oral exam, you must get a minimum of 70% of the 50 total scoring units correct, or 65% of the 25 scoring units in each of the two languages. Now, Having told you how many scoring units are in this first portion of the test, and how many you must interpret correctly, I'm going on to say that on the day of the test, don't worry or freak out about scoring units. Concentrate on your overall performance. If you focus on guessing which words or phrases are scoring units, you'll simply be draining the mental energy you need to focus on your performance. While taking the actual exam, you do not know which words or phrases will count as scoring units, even though your exam is rated by the number of scoring units interpreted correctly. The time to focus on scoring units is now, when you're preparing for the test. Here you have a list of the types of scoring units that are scattered throughout the test. Now, switch your focus to sight interpretation techniques, both studying for and in the ACEBO. That is spelled A-C-E-B as in boy, O, materials. Now would be a good time. In these materials are many sight translation exercises. Some are longer than 225 words, which is the test limit. But that is good, because in practicing and studying, you'll be pushing yourself beyond your present comfort limit, and thus be better prepared for the test. You could also use newspaper or magazine articles on a range of topics as study scripts for the test. Remember to time yourself, both when reading through the document before trying to interpret it, and when giving your sight translation. And again, record yourself while practicing sight translation. Why do I keep insisting on this? After recording, you can listen to yourself, identify your strengths and weaknesses, acknowledge areas that need improvement, if you're willing to be objective as you listen to yourself, and can become more comfortable interpreting while being recorded. That is a good strategy, because that is what happens when you take the test and every time you interpret in most courts in Oregon judicial districts. Whether preparing for the test or taking the test, know your timing. You've learned that during the test you will have 6 minutes total in each part of the sight interpretation portion. 2 minutes to read and 4 minutes to sight interpret. When studying, train yourself to use the entire allotted time, 2 minutes, to read the document. If you've finished reading the document before the 2 minutes have lapsed, keep scanning the document. You may catch something you overlooked the first time. Don't rush your reading. Don't rush your oral rendition of the sight translation either. When preparing for the test, time yourself and learn how long it takes you to sight translate the 225 words, because during the test, you have 4 minutes to give your rendition. Practice delivering your sight interpretation at a smooth, even pace, knowing your timing. If you know your pace, you won't feel so rushed or tense while taking the test. You'll have time to think, so know your timing. While studying for the test, train yourself to always read the entire document before beginning to sight translate. Again, why do I keep emphasizing this? Because it is so common for someone to be handed a document and that person disregards the proctor's instructions, jumps into sight translation without reading, and thus the person has no context, no time to prepare for grammatical hurdles that will come along the way. Not reading the document in its entirety can create a negative outcome during your rendition. For example, if you come across unknown vocabulary as you're sight interpreting, you may start adding and which can affect your goal of a smooth, even pace. Or you might be more likely to fall into using false cognates or fall into other scoring unit problems if you haven't read the document completely before starting your rendition. Train yourself. Rewire your brain so you will read the whole document before letting words out of your mouth when you take the test. Create the habit as you prepare for the test of making notes regarding vocabulary while reading the document and then referring to your notes when you do the sight interpretation. Now remember, you can't use dictionaries during the test. However, you can use part of your 2 minutes of reading time to sort things out in your mind and jot the words down on the notepad provided to you. Creating this habit can help you give that smooth, calm, even-paced sight translation that is your goal. In sight translating, there is more leeway for meaningful meaning interpretation, but don't let that lead you to omit content. To develop sight interpreting skills, There are a number of other techniques and strategies you should foster. One is to hone your skill in identifying content and structure of the Sight Translation document. How do you identify content and structure? First, read the document in its entirety before starting to Sight Translate. While doing that, you can figure out which long sentences will need to be broken up going into the other language. You need to identify in each sentence the noun, the verb, and the subject of action. Also, keep your eyes on any sentence structure that needs to be reversed going into the other language. Another component that is important to recognize in content is compound nouns with modifiers. For example, a phrase such as a crappy, old-fashioned loudspeaker. You don't want to admit anything. As you prepare for the Sight Translation portion and all others, expand your vocabulary and memorize frozen legal terms. For example, to wit, or field sobriety test, or true bill. If you don't know the meaning, look up these words in Black's Law Dictionary, or the Glossary of Commonly Used Court and Justice System Terminology, which is available on the National Center for State Courts website under the tab Interpreter Certification. Once you understand the terms in English, research the correct way to interpret the term into the target language using bilingual dictionaries of legal terms. During your test preparation, focus on your diction in both languages. In this context, diction means your choice of words, especially with regard to correctness, clearness, or effectiveness. Listen to your recording objectively, critically. Make sure you are enunciating correctly in both languages. That is, uttering articulate sounds, and that your pronunciation is correct, that you are saying words correctly. Continue to practice your oral rendition of the source texts that you are using, remembering, as mentioned before, to master your own pacing, your delivery of the interpretation at a smooth, even pace. One technique that helps achieve that pace is to breathe deeply and project calm. And when taking the test, don't allow yourself to get frustrated and stop interpreting when you don't know how to interpret a word or phrase. Skip it and keep going, according to tips from the National Center for State Courts. Now we're moving on to Sight Translation practice. It is highly recommended that you record yourself during this exercise. On the next slide, you'll see a sample document. Remember, this sample is not found in any version of the real exam, but it does give you a taste of what you will encounter during the exam. You will Sight Translate the entire document from English into your target language. You'll have 6 minutes to review and Sight Interpret the entire document. Once the 6 minutes starts, you won't hear me again until I prompt you at the 2-minute mark to start your Sight Interpreting. No need to pause the module. Okay, now we'll move on to the practice document. You have 6 minutes, and I'm starting the timing now. You should begin your sight interpreting now. Okay, was that practice easy or challenging? Let's see how things went for you. Next, you'll see the sample document you just sight interpreted, but this time with underlined scoring units. 25 scoring units, and you need 70% of the units correct to have passed this practice. Don't fret, you can miss 8 scoring units and still pass. How did you do? Take your time to score yourself. Did you achieve the minimum passing score for this practice of 17 of 25 scoring units? Whether you did or not, keep practicing to sculpt your sight interpreting skills. Let's review. Did this presentation meet our goals and objectives? Chord Language Access Services sincerely hopes to have met the goal of giving participants some tools, tips, and resources to help prepare for the court interpreting oral exam. And our objectives? Do you understand the structure of the oral exam's sight translation portion? Did we give you some techniques on preparing for this portion of the test? And did you have a chance to practice sight interpreting? We gave you the material. I hope you used it. If you have questions, please send an email to the address shown on your screen. Your questions will be answered as soon as possible. Thanks for your participation and your interest in being a certified court interpreter. Best of luck, and the more you prepare, the better your luck will be.